All right, Council, our special meeting for Tuesday, September.
How about
Yeah, it's
April?
good. I like that. And is it really the 7th or is it the 14th? What's today?
14th.
14th.
Tax day tomorrow.
There we go. 14th is in session, believe it or not. Any changes to the agenda? Okay.
Well, we will be asking for an executive session.
Okay.
So,
No, let's just make the motion. Go ahead as C for exec session. All right, then the agenda as amended is approved. First item is the city environmental action plan.
want to introduce it?
Good evening, Council. I think the cover memo that I put with this draft copy of the action plan sort of explains how we got here and why we did it. Mary Jo Lockbaum is here. She co-authored the action plan with me. She's really the expert on environmental issues, not me. So she was going to do a quick run through for the benefit of our television and internet audience. Probably about a 20-minute presentation on the plan itself, and then we'll have some question and answer. The outcome that we would hope for tonight is that this plan is something that council approves of, and you give us the go-ahead to go ahead with adoption of this plan so we can pursue the next level of environmental leadership with the state of Colorado. If not, give us some direction on what things are missing or what things you don't like about it, any changes you would like us to make. So with that, I will turn it over to Mary Jo for the presentation.
Why don't you take that, and I'll go down here.
Okay, no worries.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me in to talk about the environmental action plan tonight. I know that environmental issues are in the news all the time. I've been in this field for many, many years, so it's really great to see it finally all over the press. But I do find that there's still quite a bit of confusion out there. A lot of companies are going green, individuals are going green, and cities are going green. So what I wanted to cover tonight is what that really means. Why should a city go green? What does that mean for Littleton? And what are some of the things, if we decide to go in that direction, and I know we've already started, it's a green thing, we've gotten some great kudos that Kelly has won an award recently. How can we take the next step as a city, and what would that look like? So we've got together with the Sustainability Committee and formulated some goals, and those types of things are what I want to talk about tonight. So I'm going to start by just talking about what sustainability is so that we can all be on the same page. Sustainability is broader than just environmental. Sustainability is really encompassed of three different areas: environmental stewardship, the one that you hear the most about, social responsibility, and economic improvement, if you will, or development. So when we talk about sustainability, you'll see that we try to relate back to these goals, all three of them. Because most organizations, whether they're for-profit or non-profit, have historically been focused largely on economic development, you hear a lot more about the social and environmental side of sustainability these days. But make no mistake that all three of these things are interdependent on each other, and that little sweet spot in the middle, that's where we want to be when we're looking at goals and decision making and what's best for the city on a long-term basis. Getting right in the middle is really the spot to be for sustainability. So we'll kind of work on that goal. So what does that mean in terms of a city? Sometimes sustainability is called the 3 E's. Sometimes it's called the 3 P's. The 3 E's are economy, ecology, and equity. Economy, that bottom line, ecology, the social, or the environmental responsibility, and equity, the social responsibility. Sometimes it's called people, planet, and profit. It doesn't matter what you call it. We're just trying to align all three of these areas. And so for our city, here's some of the ideas: that the economic activity should serve the common good, should be self-renewing, build local assets, self-reliance, that type of thing. Ecology, obviously, humans are a part of the environmental, the environment, and nature has its limits. So how can we deal with the limits of nature and still make sure that our communities thrive? And then equity, that whole decision-making for society, the activities and benefits of society, and full participation in that. So you're going to see one of the goals is to get the citizens more involved, even though you're still at kind of an early stage. That's something we're going to shoot for in the long term. So what are the advantages of a sustainable city? Now think about these in the long term as well as sometimes a little bit on the short-term side. Monetary savings, I like to put that on the top. I've been in this field, like I said, for a long time, but I've also been in the corporate world and I have a business degree. This is not going to survive without some monetary hook. It is really important to realize that there is a monetary hook and it's not a bad thing. Thousands of dollars you can save each year. I know we're already starting to realize some of that. I think you'll see that a lot more as you do more energy audits, as we get a hold of Denver Water and have them in the door, find some places where we can conserve water. And those prices are only going to go up. So over time, if you're reducing now, you're really cutting down a large spike in the future. So monetary savings becomes really important. Job creation and tax revenue. This is really important, obviously, for every city that's going through this. And many, many cities have gone through it. Many are going through it, and a lot of people haven't even started in their city yet. So I think you guys are ahead of a lot of the folks out there. Green companies can provide green jobs. And obviously in Colorado, that's a pretty big deal right now. The governor's new energy economy, that's a key part of Colorado's economy. And it's very interesting to see what's going on in Denver and surrounding cities on the green economy and green businesses bringing in those new jobs. It also brings in people who are interested in green living, green residents, if you will, and home buyers and renters who want to be in a like-minded city. So there's some tax revenue there and job creation. Risk minimization. Again, if you look at the price of energy, you can cut down that spike over time. That's just one of the many ways that you can minimize risk. And improve air quality, which I think is pretty obvious. Again, people think of it just as an environmental issue, but improved air quality isn't just outside. It's also in the buildings, and what's used to clean the carpet, and what's used to clean a restroom, and walls, etc. You don't necessarily want to be breathing those toxic chemicals in all day long. And that can also lead to lost work days and sick days. So there's a lot of tie-ins for a city and any organization in sustainability. I've got a couple quick examples. I'll run through these pretty quickly. We'll read all the bullets on what other cities are doing just to give you some examples of what's out there. There's so much out there on the web. All you need to do is type in sustainability city and just watch what comes up, and you'll be amazed at what some of the cities are doing. I also wanted to give you an idea of the size of the city. Minneapolis, where I used to live, quite a bit bigger than Littleton. But I'm going to talk as well about a city that's a lot closer to the size of Littleton so that you'll know it's not just Boston and Seattle that are doing this. Cities of all sizes are pursuing these types of endeavors. So in Minneapolis, in their animal care and control building, they did some space planning design, reducing the square footage of the building. That's a pretty big deal because they saved, clearly over $500,000 in construction costs. They did some energy efficient lighting. Also something that I know that you guys are pursuing and that we're still finishing up in some of those areas. Low flow fixtures, those are becoming standard. You even see, public restrooms now with standard low flow fixtures because it's so much cheaper even to replace an existing fixture and use a low flow fixture as the price of water goes up. Pervious paving, meaning that water can seep through the paving instead of just running off, so it can reduce pollutants. And they used a humidification system, which we could certainly use here as well, resulting in improved health and safety. Here's Charlottesville, Virginia, claiming themselves on the web as a very green city, really close to the population of Littleton. So this is a relatively smaller city compared to Minneapolis, but they've done a lot, and they continue to do that. They have done a comprehensive water and energy audit of all their buildings. Now this is focused inside. They're looking for physical and operational improvements so that they can reduce natural gas consumption, they can reduce water consumption, they can reduce the consumption of electricity. They've identified first-year savings of over $200,000. And they also tracked emissions, 2.7 million pounds of carbon dioxide. That's something that as we go forward with our program, we're going to want to track the cost savings and track the emissions reductions because we want those quantifiable benefits to be able to tell to businesses, residents, other cities, and win awards for. It's really important to track our successes in that way. And they're looking at a total construction cost here in the 1.8 million range, which I think by any estimation has a relatively long payback, but it has a payback, a full payback in 9 years. That's not always true of a lot of $1.8 million projects. And then Seattle, a very green city, a very large population. And there's so much out there in Seattle. Just a couple highlights that they're trying to attract green businesses into the area. So Seattle's also piloting with some of the local community colleges to get adults trained and up to speed so that they can raise the standard of living for those lower socioeconomic classes in Seattle. So it's a whole different ballgame depending on whether you're looking just at internal city operations or as time goes on, most cities tend to start reaching out to the residents and looking at more a little bit along the lines of the social equity issues as well and start looking at what the economic benefits of those are. So this kind of brings us to the plan, and this is what, you have all received copies of the plan, right? So in the plan we talked about sort of where Littleton has been in the past and where they're going now. In the past, Littleton has had a really great history of building preservation. There's been some wonderful things done with buildings that a lot of cities have not done, and you're to be commended for that. Certainly in the recent past, we've done some amazing things with the Sustainability Committee. You've had many of these programs in place for many years, I understand, the summer cleanup, recycling oil, Christmas tree recycling, et cetera. And now, because of the committee and because of Kelly's hard work, you've recently won an Environmental Leadership Award. We won that at kind of a more basic level, and we're going to go from bronze to gold. That's the goal right now. There are a lot of awards out there that I think we can win as we progress forward, and winning those awards helps people understand, kind of underscores what's going on in that Sustainability Committee and how far-reaching it is. So what's next for Littleton? Here I put the sustainability mission statement up there. I'll read it for the benefit, I guess, of the audience. The daily activities of city government have a significant impact on the quality of Colorado's public health, environment, and natural resources. The city of Littleton takes a position of leadership in the new energy economy. Now, that's a statement about Colorado. That's great. The city will reduce energy consumption, increase the use of renewable energy sources, increase energy efficiency, decrease the environmental impact of the city vehicle fleet, and reduce waste. That's saying quite a bit. And I think a lot of our goals fall in line with this mission statement, as you'll see. Our sustainability goals are built around these key sustainability targets: energy conservation, waste reduction, water conservation, air quality improvement, and leadership, education, communication, and citizen involvement. So as we go through here, I'm going to kind of hit every single one of those. Our sustainability goals around energy. Now realize that this is a first-year plan, and we expect these goals we expect to be able to meet the goal, and then as we progress in years forward, to ratchet up the goal or to come up with new goals in these areas. So if there's a particular area that you'd like to see a goal in, by gosh and by golly, I think you can rest assured that that will probably be addressed. What we're trying to do is prioritize those goals right now and not be too overwhelming. But energy conservation is a really important area. It's a money savings. It's just the right thing to do. It saves emissions. It improves air quality. It's a great place to start. So we really wanted to go with the sustainability goal on energy to reduce building energy use by 10% by 2010 using 08 as a baseline. The objectives and successes there, I won't go through every single one of them. And these are written out in a lot more detail in your plan, that's sort of how we're going to get there, why we're doing this, and how we're going to get there. And there's quite a bit of discussion amongst the committee members on how to get there. There's been a lot of effort on this already. But suffice it to say, we're looking to conserve energy in the HVAC system in our buildings and encourage efficient operation and reduce emissions of greenhouse gases and track those reduced emissions of gases. Of course, go back just 1 second. One of the ways that we want to make sure that we meet the goal is by having a quantifiable goal to start with and then having a way to track whether or not, quarter by quarter, we're on target to meet that goal and what some of the success factors might be in meeting the goal. It's not just reducing it by 10%, but it's making sure that when you go into a city-owned building, where it's practicable, there is a motion sensing device in the room. There's a dimmer on the switch. That, if where it isn't there now, you'll be surprised at some of these changes that you will just simply accept over time because you won't see anything differently. And you won't see it in any other city building in a while either. You won't see just a standard incandescent bulb after a while, and I'm sure that you've seen that in public buildings now. You start to see those devices. It's just becoming par for the course because they save so much money. And you'll see the nighttime and seasonal setbacks, etc. Our sustainability goal on waste reduction. This is a quote from the goal itself, that the city looks for opportunities to reduce waste, recycle, decrease the volume of material going to landfills, and purchase recyclable materials. So our goal is to enhance the existing program that's in place right now throughout the city buildings. There's a lot that we can do to enhance that program. It's there, but are we getting enough compliance? When you look at a trash can, you see any recyclables in the trash can. Does everybody understand? Is it convenient? Is it well labeled? Do visitors know what to do? So those types of things help us enhance the program. We want to minimize the space taken up in landfills. We want to minimize the use of virgin resources by using recycled ones. And trash that's landfill generates greenhouse gases versus trash that's recycled or composted does not. So we want to minimize the generation of greenhouse gases as well by having an enhanced recycling program. And our success is that we're going to do an audit. We want to see at least 80% compliance, doing a spot check at least once a year. And that's the way that we know the program is working. It's either working or it's not. It's either convenient or it's not. People will generally do the right thing if the bins are convenient, they're well labeled, visitors know what to do, and people expect it of you as well at work. So I expect that we'll probably exceed that goal. Sustainability goals around water conservation, a very important issue, particularly here in Colorado. We would like to look for ways to avoid wasting water by using it efficiently and preserve water quality. So our goal here in general is to reduce water consumption. And we're going to do that by having Denver Water come in and conduct an audit. This is a great program. There's no charge for Denver Water to come in and conduct an audit. It's in their best interest and in ours to reduce the water that we consume as a city. So it's a wonderful opportunity for them to look at what we're doing in buildings and what we're doing as far as our irrigation systems. And we're also going to take a look at some research that we're going to do on green roofs and rain gardens. Two things that can conserve water considerably and that a lot of other cities have pursued. So we're going to get data from the Denver Water folks regarding their audit, and then the Sustainability Committee will get a report back on the green roofs and rain gardens so that they can make a decision on going forward with those. Some sustainability goals around air quality improvement. Of course, we look for opportunities to improve the air quality in fleet and public works snow removal. Our goal there is to improve air quality by reducing city vehicle fuel consumption by 10% by 2010 using 08 as a baseline. A lot like the energy goal, where we want to ratchet down the amount of fuel that we're using. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. It's not necessarily just driving fewer miles, just saying that you can't drive that vehicle today. It might be carpooling, it might be any number of things. It might be not idling. It might be right turn only. There's a lot of different ways to reduce fuel consumption. And I know that that is also a touchy area for some of the emergency response folks. And we certainly are taking that into account when we look at a goal like that. We don't want to say that, for example, the fire department has to minimize the number of miles they drive. So we're really looking at how a city operates when we formulate a goal like that. The objectives are to conserve fuel and improve air quality, increase driver awareness by providing feedback. This is where the amount of fuel consumed by department is reported back to that department on a regular basis, so that while they're busy patting themselves on the back for driving fewer miles or for whatever they've done, if they see their usage go up, they know that something else might be going on. It might be a seasonal issue and they would expect it to go up. And maybe it doesn't go up as much as they thought, etc. So feedback is really an important mechanism in helping people reduce their fuel consumption. We also want to reduce the fuel and vehicle maintenance costs. When we drive fewer miles, there isn't as much maintenance on the vehicle because it doesn't get to 10,000, 30,000, 50,000 miles as quickly. So there's a lot of monetary savings that go along with this goal. And of course, we want to not only reduce emissions, but we want to establish a baseline for emissions so that we can say back in 08, 09, wherever we establish that baseline. This is what we're reducing from. So we can say we've reduced 25%, we've reduced 50% over time or whatever. It's really important to get that baseline for not only fuel use, but to turn that into pounds of carbon dioxide. And our success is going to be an annual reduction in costs, some recommendations that we're going to communicate to all the departments on how to reduce fuel consumption specific to their department operations, and to see that emissions are truly reduced. On the leadership, education, communication, and citizen programs, we have kind of a long, sort of lofty, I won't read the whole thing again, goal, which is really important. This is such a key area. This is an area that I'm really glad to see that Littleton is looking at, because without the communications portion, without the leadership and education portion, a city doesn't do as well. It doesn't communicate to its citizens. It doesn't communicate amongst and in between departments. And so sometimes a good idea on sustainability doesn't go very far because the communication kind of falls off. So I'm really glad to see that this is an important area for Littleton to communicate both within its own departments as well as supporting citizens, vendors, and customers, et cetera, who are committed to sustainability. And I think you'll find, as you start to communicate what you've done and what you're planning to do, that the people and the businesses that are interested in this will come out of the woodwork like you won't believe. And it's really great to see that because they'll volunteer for things. And that makes them, happy. It makes your job feel a little easier as well. So the goal here is to demonstrate the city's leadership in sustainability and communicate successes and opportunities to the community. And I think that and opportunities part is so key because there are lots of opportunities associated with this, whether that's education, volunteering, etc. The objective here is to investigate, discuss, and plan some methods to educate. This is such a big area that we really need to kind of dissect it. So our first step here is to get everyone together, get them all on the same page, and figure out exactly how we're going to do this. There are many, many different departments involved, so we want to kind of take this slow and make sure that we're doing the right thing. And then our successes is to collect some data on city events so we can document who's interested and how many people are showing up. If we run a green event, how many people show up and what are they interested in? We want to report on increased collection of materials and apply for awards and recognition, which is in place and in progress right now. And then continue our Earth Day event for employees. I think you'll see this area grow over time as well. Lastly, this last part of the plan, I'm just kind of wrapping up my 20 minutes here and then I'll open it up for questions. I put together a number of recommendations based on my understanding of what Littleton is doing, where you've been, where you're going now, where you want to go in the future, and what other cities do, what other cities are doing. So these are my recommendations on what you might consider taking the next step forward, realizing that we've already laid out in the last 15, 20 minutes a huge number of goals that are going to involve a lot of people over a period of time. But getting this plan to be a little bit more cohesive and getting more focus in that group, I think as we move forward, we want to involve the citizens of Littleton more actively. There's a major force out there in citizens who are really interested in their city going green, and they will help you do an awful lot of things. So, citizen satisfaction, we want to spark some volunteerism. And this also, very importantly and strategically, helps pave the way if you decide later on, as a city, to enact a local ordinance based on sustainability. It's very important for your citizens to be involved lockstep with you along the way so it's not a surprise. So it's something that they've been asking you for instead of being surprised with in the future. This is a really important piece that cities consider. And then there's several different ways of doing this. These are just some recommendations. You directly survey people or solicit participation in some of the meetings. Maybe even host a sustainability fair, a very popular event with many cities. Consider even staffing a green booth, if you will, having some members of the sustainability committee. It's like, thank you. Staff a green booth at some local events, just to get the word out there about what you're doing, in addition to what's going on the website and what's already there. Another recommendation is to challenge the local businesses to get involved. Have them meet some basic standards in waste and energy management. A lot of companies are already doing this. A lot of companies need just a little bit of push to kind of get in there, and then there's still a fraction of companies that are kind of in the dark, and they've just been too busy heads down to really even look at this new sustainability stuff. Energy and waste management is really important. It's a monetary savings opportunity, and it's a huge opportunity for us to do the right thing right now. And it makes such great business sense that a lot of companies want to be involved. So their success is your success. When companies in Littleton get involved, and if they can help quantify those benefits, that's Littleton's success. And Littleton can help take credit for that, and it's kind of it's a win-win relationship with the businesses. It keeps local businesses happy. It attracts new businesses and brings additional jobs into the community. A lot of green cities are seeing that. There's a number of ways to go about that. Issuing a sustainability challenge to businesses, helping them with some educational events, initiating a recognition program, just like the Colorado Department of Environmental Health has issued their own recognition program, and the city of Littleton won an award. That's a big impetus, winning that award, to help underscore the credibility of the program and move it forward. The city of Littleton can do that as well with their local businesses, and you see a lot of cities around Colorado starting to do that. The businesses probably wear those little logos on their front doors. So it's really an interesting way to reach out to local businesses. Another recommendation is to set a standard for green buildings. This is a pretty big deal, and this could take a long time to do. Again, these recommendations are really future-looking. They're not suggesting that you necessarily step into them right now. But in the future, you may consider setting a minimum standard for green buildings, and that means if you want your building to be recognized as green by the city of Littleton, you have to build it to these standards. And there are green building standards out there already, as many of you probably are aware. Some of those standards are national in scope. Some of them are international in scope. They're based on how businesses operate. They're based on how homes operate, hospitals, schools. Doesn't matter. Every building type, every major building type now has a green standard in the U.S. And in fact, I have a certification for green building, and it's fairly popular in the sustainability field. Lots of people involved in this because those buildings save energy, they save water, they reduce waste, they operate a little differently. It doesn't have to necessarily be a new building either. It can be a building that's being renovated or even a residential area that's being renovated, whether that's multifamily dwelling or even an individual home. There's opportunities down the line for Littleton to recognize its own green building program or to even partner with a green building organization, adopt their standards, and recognize residents and businesses for doing the right thing. And they're only going to be saving money and doing the right thing socially and environmentally as they go forward. Hire a sustainability coordinator. I could talk all night about this, and it's not because I used to be one. It's because I think that this is a huge, huge job. I've worked with the Sustainability Committee and Kelly, and I am amazed at how much they're doing and how much they've done. This job is very complex. As you move forward, if you decide to adopt this plan, and as you start to move forward and perhaps look at some of those additional recommendations, the complexity of the job just gets deeper and deeper because you need someone, or a number of someones, many cities have an entire staff working on this, that reaches out to all the different departments within the city, that reaches out to the citizens, that reaches out to local businesses, that helps with communications, that stays on top of awards, that's a subject matter expert, that gets really deep into research about alternative fuel vehicles and energy. I mean, it's a very deep topic. So I would recommend that you consider having someone that is your sustainability coordinator. I did put kind of on the bottom of the slide on the how. If you're not sure about how to do this, because this is a terrible time to recommend anybody hire anybody, isn't it? The economy is in turmoil. It's very difficult to staff any positions. Many cities do this right now by starting out with part-time coordinators working into full-time. It's one of those areas that allows for much more in-depth management of the types of goals that we're looking at and allows for expansions of your program beyond just the city-owned buildings. I think that you see a lot of mileage with the sustainability coordinator in charge of this. It's something to consider over time. Another recommendation is to keep the momentum and set some really aggressive goals, realistic but aggressive goals that are measurable. Every goal that we set, with a few exceptions, has a very measurable component, and we set up areas for success. So we just want to ensure that as time goes on, we continue to set measurable goals and that we continue to report back on them. And the Sustainability Committee, which I think is just composed of a wonderful group of really splendid individuals that are very passionate about this, can offer insight and coordination as well as some pushback on what they think should be there. In fact, I think they ratcheted up some of the goals that were originally set there. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. I won't go into all of them, but I think this is kind of a given, and we want to make sure it stays on the plate. One last additional recommendation is to promote a sustainable business model throughout the city operations. The difference in a sustainable business model versus the standard model is that sustainability is okay as long as it's profitable. That's kind of standard. A sustainable business model looks at sustainability as being managed, moves it from being managed outside of the core business activities where you miss some strategic opportunities for value creation to a commitment to sustainability at a very high level. It becomes not just a separate program anymore, but it becomes part of the way that we run the city operations. And successful businesses that have incorporated sustainability incorporate it in that way. It is not something that they do from day one, because it takes a while to get to that point. But I want to bring this point up because I think in the future, as Littleton has more successes and has opportunities to grow in these areas, this will become really key. That's my last slide. I've gone over a couple of minutes, but I did want to leave some time for questions.
Jim?
In the media, you hear a lot about carbon footprint, and it's frequently measured in tons. Would you explain what a carbon footprint is and how they get to those measurements?
Sure, I would. The question of carbon footprint, everyone heard that and how it's measured. Carbon footprint, it's a little bit of a misnomer. Let me back up a step and say that there are multiple greenhouse gases that affect the atmosphere, and they affect it in a negative way, causing a global climate change. And one of the major gases is carbon. Not every gas, and not every greenhouse gas is carbon-based, but many of them are. So it's sort of a shorthand way to measure the impact of a business operation on the environment by measuring the amount of carbon it generates. And the amount of carbon that an operation generates is called its carbon footprint. So how much of a footprint it has environmentally. That's measured by a number of different, taking into account a number of different operations, such as, for example, plane travel and vehicle travel, and the number of times and number of hours that the lights are on, and the heating and cooling load of a building. There are a multitude of factors, depending on what your business is, to measure those activities that generate carbon and result in carbon down the line. And then they take all those factors, they use conversion factors, engineers use conversion factors to convert those into tons of carbon generated. And as an example, for vehicle travel, there's a certain amount of fuel that's used, there's the life cycle of the car that can be taken into account, there's a multitude of other factors to say, when I drive my car, I generate approximately X tons of carbon every mile. That's going to be less than one. And so if I have 1,000 miles, I can multiply that and say, I've got this many tons of carbon by driving my vehicle this many miles. And when I can extrapolate that to the city fleet, I can also use that when I look at the lights. I can use that for any number of operations.
And I need to add a footnote to that too. As a committee, we talked about carbon footprints, and as you can tell, it's very complicated to calculate. And you may have noticed there is no mention of carbon footprint in our plan, and that is intentional. We're kind of a voluntary, we are a voluntary committee, and there was some disagreement amongst the members as to what a carbon footprint is, how you calculate it. And so we decided to not even address the city's carbon footprint because maybe we're just not smart enough to understand what it is, but we really don't understand what it is.
I think it's complicated. That's why I asked that question, because I think the general public does not understand what a carbon footprint is and how it's measured, particularly when they start talking about all these tons of pollution that it's putting out and how that gets measured.
We
That's why I
figured we
asked
had enough going on that we just leave that alone for now.
I get asked that question a lot. It's a very common question. It's a great question because it doesn't make sense intuitively to say if I turn the lights on, how does that generate 5 tons of carbon dioxide every year or whatever? That doesn't really equate unless I understand the engineering behind it. And then I can say, well, I have to run a fossil fuel plant for so long, there's an incremental amount I have to run that fossil fuel plant to light this light or to run this particular machine. And therefore, I can say that fossil fuel plant uses this type of coal and it generates these types of emissions which have this amount of carbon associated with them. So when I kind of back into those calculations, I can say I am responsible for generating X amount of pounds and then convert that to tons of carbon.
And that's why it's not in our plan.
It's doable. It's just that carbon footprint became a mainstream term and it became really important for everyone to rush out and measure their carbon footprint. It's important as time goes on to consider that, but if you look at the operations of a city operations from one to the next, there's a number of similarities that the great thing is that a number of cities have gone before Littleton, and you can look at what they've done, you know what most of your biggest impacts are, and you can start to attack those. But it's a slow process, and one of the ways that people sometimes do it is a very linear way, and that's measuring their carbon footprint first and saying, well, this activity generates the most carbon, so we're going to really concentrate on this activity because what we care about is reducing carbon. And you can go about it that way. It's just a little bit more, it's a little time-consuming and expensive up front, and it's not necessarily the best way to get you going to launch a program. It's something you may want to consider over time.
Tom?
How long has your group been in business?
Well, we've been in business since 2008, which isn't very long, quite honestly, but I've been in this field over 20 years, and it's my business.
You're way ahead of your time.
I've tried to explain that to people for many years, and they're pleased.
I'm very proud of the Littleton staff because they got about 2.5 pages in here of what they're already doing on this sort of thing. Plus, we had a councilwoman here in August of 2006, Amy Conklin, that came up with the same environmental design and energy efficiency ordinance with a lot of things you just said, what Littleton currently does, a good review of what other cities are doing, incorporation of alternate energy vehicles into the city's fleet building certification. She's really ahead of her time there too for us. What are we supposed to do next?
You just say, we love the plan, now let's move on and have Phil talk about stimulus money?
We love the plan, we like Phil to talk.
All right. Debbie?
Will you speak?
What I didn't notice, and I might have overlooked it, is anything, and I don't know if it has to do with sustainability, but recycling, of course, is a big deal, but part of the success of recycling is that the products that are recycled are then repurchased. So they make things out of them, and then you know, the repurchase of those. So do we have a policy or anything that about repurchasing of so much post-consumer?
Yeah, in that, it's the section towards the end where it talks about other things that we'd like to do. One is, one of the things that we are recommending, we're trying to be easy-handed with this and not heavy-handed with the stuff and say that you must do it, but we're saying we would like for you to purchase materials made of recycled products wherever possible. And the second part of that is that the Sustainability Committee actually has formed a subcommittee that is, they've gathered from 3 or 4 different cities an environmental purchasing policy that would be coming out of the finance department, so it would be green purchasing. So they've looked at what other cities are doing, and they'll probably bring that forward at some point. But, you know, I don't know how much enforcement we put on it, but it would be sort of the standard that we would recommend to employees, and of course, it would have to have some flexibility if,
Well, and some of those products are substantially more expensive than others, so we'd have to look at stuff like that too.
and that is certainly the trade-off. That's one part of the reason that we did the plan in the first place too, is that, there's a lot of things that we want to do. Some are cost-effective at this time, but some aren't, and a lot of those will probably come along over time as they become more widely available, but some things are expensive.
Are you
I had
going
to-
to Portland next week?
No, sir, are you?
That's too bad, you should be going to that. That one looks good.
Well, all righty.
Go.
Another question is, and would be a suggestion, I guess, the electronics recycling that we do that once a year.
Yes.
If possible, I'd like to see us do that twice a year. I don't know if part of what I do for my clients is to, encourage that type of thing, and there's to pay for that is prohibitive to a lot of people, and so they often have those around town. And in fact, I think it was probably about a month ago, Channel 9 had it.
I
It
saw
was-
what happened.
it
They
was
got
too
overwhelmed.
successful. They had to shut it down after a couple of hours. And so what happens is when you only have it occasionally, there tends to be such a glut and such an overwhelming response to it that it really it works contrary to what you intended. So I know there is a cost to doing it, but if it would be possible to do it twice a year, because somebody decides to get rid of their computer, they don't really want to go put it in their garage for a year, I was going to say for an hour, for a year until the event comes around. And then the other question I had is, when do we have our shredding event? Do we have a shredding event?
We never have had, but the Littleton Police Safety Day on May 17th, they've hired a contractor to come in, and they're wrapping it around the whole identity theft issue, that you can shred your personal documents and you can feel safe knowing that they're being properly disposed of. So we will be doing that on May 17th.
Right.
And your point about electronics recycling is a good one. I don't remember off the top of my head. That's run by Rebecca Thompson in Codes and Enforcement, but the city doesn't charge a fee for that. For the household hazmat recycling, for the paints and all that, we charge like $20, I think, a car to come in, and you can bring all the paints and all that kind of toxic stuff that you want to. We don't charge a fee for the electronics recycling event, and I don't remember how much it costs, but it is expensive, and the city bears the entire cost of that.
Arapahoe Rescue Patrol did recycling in January, I think.
Yeah, I took stuff down there.
And they charged a fee for that.
Yeah.
Well, they charged only, they asked for a donation, and then they did charge for large TVs, because it was like $20 if you turn it in a large TV.
And for hard drives on your computer,
Oh, yeah, and a hard drive, if you wanted it shredded.
if you were
Well,
sure.
I'll definitely talk to Becky Thompson and see if that's feasible to do 2 of them this year.
Well, and you can even, I think it would be, I mean, I guess if we'd have to make a determination as to whether we would, have a nominal fee with that, but just to kind of help support having the double event. But I think that, in my experience, that doesn't tend to be a prohibitor to participation, to
I
have
think
some.
you're right. Okay, we'll talk to her.
Jim?
This is not really a question for Mary Jo, but it's a question for Charlie. And I don't want an answer tonight, but she mentioned something about pervious paving, which seems to be a coming thing. Could you at some point in time give us a little report about what it is, how it works? Does it create pollution? Does the water that falls down belong to somebody? Do we have trouble with our water law? And is it cost effective to do pervious paving?
We have investigated it, and I'll prepare a report for you.
Thank you.
And when will you do mineral on that?
Then we'll what?
When will you do mineral on that?
With porous paving?
Yes.
Not in my lifetime.
Any other questions? Peggy?
Comment. So I have a little feedback,
Okay?
plus several other things that came up as I was watching. So some of these are minor little things in terms of the report, particularly if it's not in final form. Some things that I think might get added or tweaked a little bit. And then in a second I can give some others. But the recommendations at the back, several of them obviously have dollars attached, and I wouldn't be ready right now just to give myself a full check to go ahead with those. Particularly, we'd have to talk about a sustainability
Well,
coordinator.
and Mary Jo and I talked about that, pretty extensively, and I certainly recognize that the city of Littleton is in no position to add any positions, and even if you were, how this would fall on a priority list of other needs within the organization. I'm very well aware of that. I think we consider this plan to be a very long-term document. I mean, some of this stuff, I hope there's an understanding here that you don't think we're going to go do all this tomorrow, because this is going to be really long-term. And I think we just wanted to get it out on the table to council that at some point, somewhere along the line in the future, that it would be nice to have a sustainability coordinator. It would be nice to have an awful lot of things, but we just wanted to get it out there for you to be aware of, that that's something we'd like to see someday.
Yeah, well, I think you guys are doing great, but if some member of the public wants a copy of what I just distributed, they can email me, but there are a few others that I'd like to mention, and then I'll type them up and send those. It would be, I think, good, and this was mentioned at the historical preservation forums, developing standards for increasing energy efficiency of historically designated buildings. So we do need something developing on that. And maybe Jim Woods could speak to President of ACC about they're developing an energy auditing program. I know they're doing, I think they mentioned something that they're doing, maybe with installing stuff, but the auditing piece is an interesting, one would think, somewhat simple, probably certificate kind of program for them to do. I question a couple of the measures of success that you mentioned here that I'm not sure if I remembered seeing in the book. Reducing fuel consumption. If we have a lot of snowstorms, like occasionally we do, we can eat up an awful lot of fuel and still have increased our efficiency.
Yes.
And the same related to the same thing. One of the measures, reduction in fuel costs. Particularly if we baseline 2008 and we don't see that happen again for 20 years, we're going to look great without necessarily doing anything.
And reverse could be true too, right?
Right. So it seems to me trying to figure a way to look at miles driven and the reducing those, but also having a way to factor in when you have unusual circumstances.
That's really common. In fact, when people do these, they usually do it with a factor regarding the weather and fuel prices and everything else, just exactly like you're saying.
Okay.
Because otherwise you get the spikes that don't look right.
Then I personally like the idea of the sustainability challenge for businesses and a recognition program for businesses, but probably also residents. If somebody's done something, and it would seem to me we might have a story a month, either on video and or in the Littleton Report, featuring what somebody's done. Just keeping it in people's minds. I already mentioned the coordinator, and another one that I think this is true, at least I heard it a few years ago. If you fly at night, the pollution effect, the environmental effect on the atmosphere is greater. I don't know how many heard that, but I heard it once and I thought, now there go the cheap fares. But if I don't do that, but I'm just wondering about encouraging people not to fly at night for that reason. So it's a minor thing, but to me, every little thing is part of a pattern that can save in small ways, but also be promoting for everybody else. Careful thinking about what we're doing. And then I did have it in here, but I do like to have bicycling and walking as some of the alternatives, because it's healthy in addition to saving the environment, so, thank you.
Anything else?
Yes,
Oh, what was that?
ma'am.
Sure.
You're going from city to city to try to get all these environmental action plans flying, so to speak. The biggest problem that we've had with atmospheric pollution has been with the advent of the jet engine years ago. Now, if you stop and think about the amount of airplanes that are flying and the tons of pollution that are going in, I would probably equate a Mount St. Helens volcano with very pittance of pollution compared to what the airplanes are leaving up there. Are you doing anything to try to reduce the planes from flying?
Absolutely, and in fact, that kind of goes back to Jim's comment about the carbon footprint. If you go down that path, if you look at your carbon footprint, one of the areas that any organization, city, for-profit, nonprofit, it doesn't matter, looks at is the amount of air travel that people do. Is it better for us to, from a monetary and environmental standpoint, is it better for us to get video phones to communicate with people? Are there ways that we can still stay abreast of what we need to and still reduce the number of conferences we attend? There's a lot of different ways to slice that, but where we do have to do air travel, a lot of times when people look at their carbon footprint, they say, how can I offset my travel by what are called renewable energy credits? And I'm over my time, so I won't get into it real deeply, but suffice it to say, you can offset the carbon that you generate as a result of your activities by purchasing an investment in a green technology. And there's a third-party certification that that technology is truly green, so that your money's going in the right spot. So you're buying wind power that would otherwise be generated or purchased or researched, et cetera, with your dollars because you're engaging in air travel, which has a high carbon footprint, just like you mentioned. So yes, to answer your question, yes. In the short term, we had to really hone down the number of goals that we put in this plan, because this is the first time Littleton has, and understandably, has formulated measurable goals moving forward. And so in the future, that may become part of a measurable goal to consider reducing air travel and to equate the carbon emissions with air travel so that we can show our success.
Anybody else? All right, thank you very much. I love the plan. However, I think if we do another shredding day, we ought to call it Fawn Hall Day.
Call it what?
Fawn Hall.
You just hated yourself.
All right, next item. Berry Avenue Park proposal. Before we start, is there anybody that doesn't want alternative one?
You need to hear from Bill first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You don't have to, it's fine with me.
Well, if you have questions for Phil,
Yeah, we can do it that way.
if you don't, we'll... Okay.
Man, that was easy. Thank you.
These wrote an excellent memo.
Now the Berry Avenue Park
Now
proposal.
Berry Avenue.
Everybody ready?
Thank you for laughing. That was very polite.
It took me a minute to get it. Took me back to my car.
We're going to take a 2-minute break and see if we can get Hal the computer to come back. He is, and I can go. I have a plan B where I can hold the plans up.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. They talk about the conservation trust. Yeah, I know, I was going to mention that, so it's budgeted.
System. Does it auto-focus compare?
Council, while they're queuing this up, one of the things that the council communication didn't talk about was funding source. And Dr. Cole just asked me, there is money in the Conservation Trust Fund in the 2009 budget. We have $400,000 in there in what we call undesignated. But that money is appropriated, so there is money in your 2009 budget to do either one of these alternatives.
How much would that leave us?
Well, there's 400,000. I just went and looked at the budget. What were these?
Up to 100?
100.
Up to 100.
Yeah, so you've got 300,000 left.
Okay.
And then that's not, remember now, that's the Conservation Trust Fund. You've got another $2 million in what we call the county share back.
Right.
And that's where we've been, later on, we'll talk about some of the acquisitions. So that's a different pot of money.
Right.
This is from the lottery, the Conservation Trust Fund. This is clearly an eligible activity for those funds. Okay.
This is a little bit blurry, but you can see it perfectly.
I can see both.
Okay, we're here to talk about a vacant parcel that the city owns.
You need a
703.
microphone, David?
Do I need a microphone?
You do.
Yes, you do.
Should I talk right here, Dave? This one?
Here.
Okay. Is that better?
That's so they can hear you on TV.
We're here to talk about a vacant parcel that the city owns, which is at 703 West Ferry Avenue. This is an aerial photo of the neighborhood. Most of you are familiar with it. This neighborhood 15 years ago was really dominated by two parks, Powers Park, which is here, and Progress Park, which is just to the north off the photo. Over the past 15 years, the city has developed a Laddie Park, which is right up here, which is taken care of by South Suburban. Both Promise Parks, which are just off the photo over here. And the city has also built an unnamed mini park that we have right there at the corner of Huron and Westbury Avenue. With those things in mind, it really doesn't make much sense for us to put another park in here. I think we're pretty good in terms of traditional parks in this neighborhood. The site that we have there is about 0.6 of an acre, or 26,676 square feet. The city currently takes care of it. It's really pretty much just grass and weeds and some Siberian elms. There was a swimming pool on the site that we filled in about 7 or 8 years ago. We currently just mow the site 3 or 4 times a year. Wanted to talk about the city pea patch program, just real briefly, because the 2 plans that we prepared pretty much add pea patches into that program on this site. The pea patch program has been going on for more than 20 years. Plot users get a 20-foot by 20-foot plot that they pay $25 for. 2 current pea patch garden sites are right by what we used to call the YMCA site. Now it's called the Stern Park Rose Garden site there. There's 117 plots there. And we also have 16 plots that we have at Ascension Lutheran Church. It's pretty wild fluctuation in terms of the number of people that take advantage of those plots. 3 years ago, about 40% of the plots that we had were vacant. As of right now, this year, we have about 50 people on the waiting list who are not going to get plots. With that in mind, and actually prior to this year when we really did have a lot of more people applying for plots than we had, last year in September and October, the tree committee, we developed a scenario. We developed a plan to go ahead and redevelop this site, and it was based on the concept of edible landscaping, and just kind of a new movement that's kind of going around the country. What we were going to do in this site, which is sort of Plan A, which we call community gardens, essentially the old swimming pool is this rectangle that's up here, and there is chain link fence on 3 sides of that. So what we were going to do is we were just going to add chain link fence and put in 10 parcels for people to use there. The rest of the site, we're going to create somewhat of a traditional park from the street side. We would go ahead and widen the concrete sidewalks out to 5 feet. We'd have a colored concrete sidewalk that came in at an angle, the concrete plaza here with shed, picnic tables, things like that, so the gardeners have a place to go to. The dash lines represent an area where we could go ahead and expand this from 10 plots to 20 plots and do different things. The rest of the site, really, we were talking about edible landscaping. We're going to put in a raspberry patch, a grape arbor, fruit trees, things like that. It would sort of be a classroom for edible landscaping. Once again, this was something that we developed in September and October. The tree committee felt pretty strong that this was a pretty good plan at that time. Since then, though, now that we do have the abundance or a surplus of people who are interested in pea patches, we developed what we have here is kind of a Plan B. This we just put together, and the tree committee last night at our meeting actually approved this, well, not approved this, basically they are supporting this plan, which is quite ironic because this plan has no trees at all. But that's very brave of them to do that. So what we have here on this site is, the way this site is laid out, there's an existing 6-foot cedar fence on this side and that side. And then there's a slope over here that's about 12 or 13 feet in width, and it drops about 5 or 6 feet. There's a slope across in the back there too. So those areas really aren't usable. What we would do is we would construct an ornamental iron fence across the front with a nice 12-foot gate to give it a pretty elegant appearance. We continue with the chain link, a 6-foot chain link fence along that side. And then we developed and we laid it out into 20 by 20 plots. There'd be 42 plots laid out the way it is. Everything from this line up would be an area we could go ahead and we till these twice a year. We till them in the springtime before they plant, and then we till them up in the autumn after everyone pulls everything out. There would be hose spigots located. There's about 14 or 16 hose spigots, so every 4 plots has a hose spigot so people have water. It also involves a water tap to put in to service those things. We would have a concrete pad here that would have a picnic shelter, a picnic table with a shelter over the top of it, and also a storage shed for people to put various things. Usually there's a community wheelbarrow, things like that are there. We also were going to do some crusher fine pathways with raised planting beds. These are 4 feet by 20 feet. The planters would be about 30 inches tall. That would allow people that can't bend over anymore or that are in a wheelchair to go ahead and access, and they could rent either half or one of those little plots. Like I said, we do have access to come in and out on this. And we would put some shrubs along in the front. The fence line is only allowed by city code, only to come out from the property line. So we do have about 3 feet between the fence and the sidewalk that we could go ahead and put some shrubs, kind of wrap them around the corner to give it a pretty elegant look from the street. Of these 2 proposals, this one would cost in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $60,000 to develop and build this the way that it's shown here. The other proposal is in the neighborhood of $80,000 to $100,000. There's a little more flexibility with that one, but obviously we don't have the number of pea patches that we would in this. And the thing that's nice about this is if this one doesn't work, for instance, if 2 years from now we have fewer people, it's very easy for us to go in and Mr. Jones can go ahead and rent 6 of those plots and grow corn on it if he wants to. So there is some flexibility in there. Or maybe we start growing food for our citizens, who knows what. But anyway, those are the two scenarios that we've laid out for you. And if you have any questions or would like to discuss it. Yes.
I just wanted to add something. One of the things that the committee was really liked about this too is that it's in the northeast area, the northeast neighborhood where you have a lot of apartments. And so consequently, you don't have people that can have, they don't get the gardens and the yards and stuff like that. So we thought it would be a real nice experience for them. And then the committee did suggest that we do a community outreach, mailing or informational thing specifically into that neighborhood to let them know about, if we decide to go ahead with this, to let them know about the pea patch and almost give them a first right, first opportunity to get reservations. Because with the popularity of it, if we open it up, it could just be a flood of everybody else from around the city that wants, and so then that neighborhood becomes underserved again for the citizens up there. So that was one of the, isn't that?
Yes.
Things that was commented on. So, and it would be just something simple enough as maybe talking to the different apartment managers and putting notice in the bulletins or on their bulletin boards, that type of thing.
We also have 2 nursing homes that are within about 3 or 4 blocks of here too. Yes.
I certainly support what Debbie said because there's an awful lot of apartments up there that have families in them, but they have a single car, and they can walk to this site to tend a garden, whereas they don't have to drive as you would if you lived out of the neighborhood. And with as many apartment units as we've got in that neighborhood, it's by far a good plot to go with this plan as opposed to the first plan.
When would you expect to have this?
We would construct this late summer, early fall, and have it ready to go. They're already moved in on the plots right now. We had them available to them 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So those people get in and they get started pretty early. So we would construct this, like I said, late summer, early fall, so we're ready to go in 2010.
Do we have any idea with our existing pea patches whether visitors appropriate the produce? As in, do people steal from other people's plots?
We've had very little of that and very little vandalism. We have had a couple of times when people have gone in and broken some of the hose spigots off last year. I think any incidents like that would really be pretty minor. We're going to surround this also. This is going to have a 6-foot fence around it, as opposed to what we have right now, which is just a 4-foot fence over there. And as far as I know, they've had very little incidents of that. Charlie, do you know any?
It has not been a significant problem,
Okay.
but it does occur.
Why the
Well, I
fence?
mean, I'm suspecting maybe with the economy the way it is, if it stays bad, it might be, because I remember where I grew up, people had gardens, in their backyard, and we lived in an apartment a couple times, for quite a few years, different apartments, and there were places to plant out back, and occasionally things, people would
Well, and the fence,
do that. So.
and to answer your question, the fence is for security. The people that have the pea patch, they get it. They get the combination. In theory, only 42 people.
And
have the combination.
this is actually surrounded by 3 apartment buildings, so there are going to be people here that'll be watching. I mean, it'll be pretty hard. I guess, obviously you get in at 2 o'clock in the morning, but it'd be pretty hard to go in there and sort of harvest corn without somebody seeing you, because it's,
The combine wakes people up at night.
Yeah, whereas, anyway.
Our pea patches do have, I'll call them unofficial captains, people that have been with us quite some time, who watch after the gardens, and they get to know everybody there.
Okay.
And they show up almost every single day. And you'll see them. I mean, if you go to the gardens regularly.
Yeah, no, I see them over at...
And, it's a self-control honor system as to how people keep others from coming into the gardens.
Okay.
It has not been a significant problem, but without question, we have had some vandalism in some of the gardens, especially the one over by the Colorado Center for the Blind.
Yeah. Now, that one and the one at the church, near the church, are not fenced, right?
The church is not fenced. The YMCA pea patch, or Stern Rose Garden, since the YMCA isn't there anymore, there is a fence around that, and like I said, that fence is now 48 inches.
Okay.
And like I said, we just had a couple times where we've had vandalism where people have gone in and broken things or whatever. But this one would be much more secure than that.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing, and to recognize the point that has been made by council, if you want us to restrict it to a certain area for people, we could get in there and really saturate the neighborhood with flyers encouraging people to do it, and then just literally hold out and say, well, if you live in a different part of town, this may not be the P-patch for you, and we can put you on a waiting list for either the church or the other P-patch. But if you want to restrict it, how many did you have in there, David, on this plan?
We have 42. It's very easy to say, if we have 42 people in this neighborhood, they get them. They get first preference.
I would
before we
think
do a
that
deadline.
with the youths and everybody else, we could probably sell this out in that neighborhood in a heartbeat.
I think you give the neighborhood the first go when they get a deadline, and then if there's some left over after that deadline, then it becomes open to the public. But Peggy, to what you were saying, we have a member on the tree committee, John Lawson, who we just put on, who is a huge pea patch gardener. His father gardened in the pea patch for 30 years. And he commented last night that it really is, it's more a community of gardeners who look out and watch out for each other, and there just seems to be a real nice respect by the neighborhood for the gardens and by the gardeners too. So I would suspect the most vandalism is probably by rabbits.
And this neighborhood will have a lot more residences around it than the other two sites have. There's limited a number of residences around the other sites as opposed to this one.
And this is a chain link fence?
There's an existing 6-foot cedar fence on two sides. We were going to put a chain link fence on this side, and actually I was going to do an ornamental fence across the front, but for $1,000 or so extra, I could extend the ornamental fence on that side too.
Is there no way maybe to incorporate some kind of fruity thing that would grow with
I could
the
do,
fence?
we've talked about, I could easily, or I could put something like a raspberry patch or grow some grapes along the fence that's up over there. What I was really trying to do here was do something where we had a pretty elegant presentation from the street.
Yeah.
They're really sensitive about trees and shade and stuff. If you go over to the YMCA,
Right.
I get a lot of requests. Every time we have a Siberian elm sucker, they want us to go and cut it out. They want us to trim the trees that are there. There are certain plots that are unusable
And
because
the
of that.
higher fence would make that even more problem.
Well, it's really, this fence looks like a wrought iron fence.
Well, no, that's okay, but I
Yeah.
mean, what I was suggesting was something growing on the fence would block it out more.
That, it would become a question over there.
Yeah.
You can find out in the course of time what would happen with those people. But we could grow grapes along that fence over on that side very easily. We actually talked about that in the tree.
Okay.
What about alternative A in the trees?
The trees, if you look at alternative A, it was very carefully designed to avoid getting shade in those areas. So if you look at alternative A, and that's one of the reasons I did. So the street trees here are basically shading this area that's in here. I really tried to pull all the trees back. I did one shade tree here to sort of shade that area, but if you think about the sun coming up and shining all the way around in these patches, they're pretty much in the sun. But even at that point, what would happen, I'm sure, is in about 10 or 15 years, this guy would say, hey, trim that apple tree. That guy would say, that apple tree shaded my site. We may have to end up cutting it back.
What about the Norgren? Didn't Norgren have a pea patch in the south?
Yes. They asked us not to do it after a couple of years because of security purposes. And we had one in Marathon for a while, and we had the same request. Marathon actually was the first place we did the raised gardens for the handicapped and elderly. We were the first city to ever do that. We call them high-rise pea patches. I've got photographs from the 1970s that show those raised gardens. But go back to your question, Norgren and others have asked us not to come do it again.
How recently?
We were in Norgren probably 15, 20 years ago.
Can we contact them again, see if they've changed their mind?
Yeah, one of the issues out there, Doug, is on the south end, we need water. And so we would have to put in our own water tap.
But it looks like they've got water taps there.
I haven't, back in those days they didn't, so I haven't been over there in a long time.
Yeah, we'd have to check that out. They've got well water on that north end. They irrigate. They've got a well in there.
Well, it may be water coming from the well, but I seem to remember going by there a while back, and it looked like they had water spigots sitting up about this high.
On that south side?
Yeah. And it looks like it's actually fenced off.
It is.
I can't tell you because it's been so long, but we could investigate that. But I know they told us that because of security purposes, they asked us to not do it.
And you think that's enough for the elevated guard plots?
Well, we don't have any right now. What I did is I tried to maximize the site in terms of, so there are 20 by 20 patches on every flat piece of ground that I have. Kind of the remainder here is up in the front there. If those do become popular, I could expand that over and we would lose other patches. There's just only so much room there. And I thought about I could chop them up and make 8. It sort of depends on what size really someone's going to rent or grow, but I think it's better to build just 4 of them.
To start.
Right. And we could go around and we could also see what sort of response we get too. If we have 20 people that say, hey, I'd love one of the elevated ones. But it's my understanding that how many people were participating before, Charlie?
We had about 12, and you could actually take a wheelchair up to them where you could
But we
sit
don't
underneath
have them
them.
now. We don't have them in either
No.
of the park that ones now.
No. And from what I've been told,
It doesn't sound like we get much.
there's not that much of a demand for them. So.
You start out small and see what happens.
I just have one question, whether the tree committee, and again, the whole idea of the pea patch is great, but was there any talk, there is a little trade-off just in the aesthetics, of the sort of the aesthetics of the neighborhood, and did they talk at all about just kind of that trade-off, because, just the street appeal and
Well, we
sort of
tried to-
adding to the overall aesthetics of the neighborhood? Was that something they talked about?
We have, and that's really what we're trying to address with this first plan, but
Yeah.
really in order to make it look good in the first plan, we're losing, 60% of our kind of buildable area.
Yeah.
Like I said, with the ornamental iron fence, and especially if we put some shrubs up in front of it, I think we could still have a pretty attractive appearance. What happens with the pea patches is over the winter, they just look like a plowed field. So 6 months out of the year, they look like that. This spring, and they get planted and stuff, they look pretty good, and they start to look more and more ragged, and they look pretty dog patchy when you get in August and September, and then we till them up again. So it's definitely, both of these plans are a lot more attractive than what's out there right now, I can tell you.
Well, and I think too, with the committee, this plan was the first one we looked at, and we looked at it, I think Dave said back in September, and at that time we didn't have the information on how many people were going to reserve pea patches, and
The
that we would
demand.
have 50
Yeah.
left unserved. And so when that information came, Dave quickly, put together a piece that would help meet the demand. And I think the demand will grow. And also, the other consideration, I think, with the committee was, given that there are so many other parks within that particular area, that it might be the option to just do a fully functioning pea patch. It might serve the community better at that point. And we also liked, too, the option that this would be very easy to integrate some of these things into as demand either declined and...
Jose?
May I? Thank you. In the 70s and 80s, I think it was, when the Garden Club was coordinating the pea patch at Stearns Park up there, actually next to the Rose Garden. We managed to keep those completely full. I think we coordinated those gardens for 7 years. We had very little pilfering by other people. I like Plan 2 here because of the fact that you don't want to put too many trees around if you're going to be planting a garden. You want to keep that as much sunlight moving in on the garden as you can. This plan looks good to me. If in the future we see that it's not functioning as much as we'd like it, then I would say do something in the front. But that looks like a good plan, and it's one that'll save us money right now. I can't see right now as to how many we're going to have, but I'd say with that few of gardens, you're going to fill it up once it's moving. And so,
So it's your district and you prefer Plan 2?
yes, I do.
Okay. Can we check with Marathon about leasing or something? Their south west.
I mean, Nordgren.
Nordgren, I'm sorry.
We'll contact them again. It's been quite a while.
Okay. All right, council, do we need to vote on this, or is there anybody that's left that wants Plan 1?
Besides you?
No, I've changed. It's Jose convinced me.
What do you need from us, Dave? Do you need us to?
You know, what we'll probably do, the accountants, the finance team will probably just bring a motion. Because the money, you've already appropriated money, so you don't, I mean, it's already in there. We'll just have a simple motion on the next week that just says you authorize going with the P-patch, and we'll move approximately whatever your budget, $60,000 from unanticipated, and we'll establish a project account. They like to have a little track record, because then the auditors always say, well, did the council authorize this?
I do have a question about the money too. If we do find that there's a large demand for the raised beds and we want to add some more, or if we do find that maybe we want to put some different fencing or something like that, will we need to come back and get that funded again, or can we?
Well, we could even move 100,000 if you want to, just,
and then that just kind of goes
it
into
just
the
sits there, it's
P-patch.
parked, yeah.
Okay.
Well, but it's already appropriated, right?
It's already
I
appropriate,
mean, so you
yes.
already have 400, you've got it covered.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of just having this line item count.
Yeah.
So we'll just make the motion, 100,000.
Because what's not expended comes back into the general fund
It'll
anyway.
just stay in the conservation trust fund balance.
Yeah. But that way then, Dave, you've got the money to do what you need to do, and you don't have to come, we don't try to move it out again for it.
Yeah.
For
if something
20,000.
else comes along, we'll come back to you. Is that okay with council? So we'll just put that on your regular agenda for next week.
Thank you, Dave. All right, that takes us to item C, which is, John, do you have your magic thing? What are we meeting on?
This is on acquisition of open space, I think it's real estate.
Okay, I move we go into executive session as permitted under by statute 246424A to purchase, acquire, lease, transfer, or sale of real, personal, or other property interest, but not to conceal a conflict of interest.
It's been moved, Jim?
Need a second.
It's been moved and seconded to go into executive session about real estate. Takes 5 votes.
Take 5 votes here, guys.
Tom, ready to vote? Raise your hand in favor. Okay, it's unanimous. We will not be coming back and making any decision afterwards.
Who's invited to do that?
It's council, Jim Woods,
Charlie,
Phil,
Suzanne.
and Suzanne.